They say they have 575 call out per day. St. John's Ambulance is called out to homes for 575 call outs. Of that 575, 75% are due to falls. Okay? So falls prevention is, just imagine the cost behind that. So falls prevention is to everybody's benefit. So are you a falls risk? Okay, polio patients attending my physiotherapy clinic at Royal Perth Hospital, Shenton Park campus, without exception, are concerned about decreasing balance, not necessarily falling, but fear of falling. The fear of falling is a bigger driver. Now, the polio literature worldwide highlights falling and fear of falling as common complaint among the groups of people who contracted polio in the earlier years. This complaint is common to patients diagnosed as having contracted poliomyelitis and those of you who are diagnosed as infantile paralysis. Now, in the early days, I used to pass it off. The patients would go to great lengths to say, my mother said I did not have infantile paralysis, I had poliomyelitis. So someone like me, what's the difference? But there is actually a difference, apparently. Infantile paralysis was given to those who actually had paralysis, and poliomyelitis was those who had the signs, symptoms, recovered, but often amongst the signs and symptoms that all the patients tell me, there's also very much a confusion with something that could have been just flu, very high fever, and meningitis. So, and then they had the same symptoms because when patients have meningitis, they also end up with being very weak, very tired, and they take a long time. So end of the day, whether you had poliomyelitis or infantile paralysis, you have that fear of falling, and falling are a huge problem. And if St. John's Ambulance is being called out 75% of the time, it's for no reason. It's just not the call out. Think about the men, think about the fact that they've diverted from another emergency. And these are the issues that we all have to face. So if you can do something to reduce the risk of falls, you're just not helping yourself, but you're also helping the system. If you can, I'm going to go through a series of information about tripping and falling. And if you would mentally tick to say, that is me, you may not fall, but you're a high falls risk. So you must do something to address that problem. So let's go for definitions first. A definition of tripping and falling. Tripping is when your center of gravity moves outside your base of support, but the body is able to return to its stable base. And that speaks for itself. And when do you fall? When your center of gravity moves outside your base of support, but the body keeps moving till it hits a stable base. In this case, it's usually the floor. Okay? So that's when you fall. Seems a bit trivial to go. It's like a splitting hairs here. Tripping and falling are results of disturbance of three mechanisms in your body. One is balance, next is equilibrium, and the third is coordination. These three are automatic reactions, in other words, and they are part and parcel of normal movement. In other words, if you have to think about putting your hand out to stop yourself, you have already fallen. You cannot think about balance. The word thinking of balance is almost an oxymoron, yeah? Because by the time you have thought, you've fallen. So what is exactly, what does balance, center of balance mean? Both those pictures represent a person in balance. He is actually balanced. So the first one is perfect balance, because look at the base of support. The person's center of gravity is falling right through, between his legs, right to the base of that ball. Okay? That's center of balance. That's what we think of balance. But the person on this side is also balanced, okay? Because his center of base is over the base of support. Now, why I bring it up is those of you in calipers will never have a center of balance the same as a non-caliper walker, because your weight, the caliper itself, shifts your balance. Okay? So you need to find out what your center of balance is and stay within it. So that's simply what balance is. Now, coordination occurs when joints and limbs work together to have a smooth flow of movement. In other words, work in synergy. For example, I only trip when my coordination is slow and poorly executed. But if I have the strength and power, I can regain my balance. Okay? So coordination is when you're fast enough Coordination is actually, no, sorry, equilibrium is when you're fast enough to come back to center. You don't have to use your hands. Coordination is when I'm not fast enough, but I can still prop. I call this the parachute reflex. Of those who can, stepping reflex. That means you actually took a step. Or you're fast enough to put your hand, the parachute reflex. That coordination, this coordination is, don't take it as obvious as it is, because or any of you with any neck pain or shoulder pain, you cannot move the hand fast enough to save yourself. So your coordination now is dependent on stiffness and pain. And if you have stiffness and pain anywhere in your body, your coordination is going to be affected, so therefore you are a high falls risk. I fall when my balance and equilibrium reactions are not automatic and too slow. So if you're not strong enough and fast enough to save yourself, either with your hand or step with your leg, you will fall. Next, what are the factors? Now this is where you start doing your mental tick. The first is balance, base of support. This is the base of support is for all of us, is the area covered by your feet and or your shoes. Now, what are the factors that affect that? It really is unequal foot size. Now, this is unequal foot size is going to be common to all of you who had leg weakness, especially if it affected the muscles of your feet. If your feet are of different size, then the base of support follows that irregular size. So in the picture that you're seeing above me, the right foot is the normal size, and notice the left foot is short of that margin, the colored margin. Okay? So the concept of dead space is that colored margin for the smaller foot. All right? What's dead space? The ability of the feet to send signals to the brain. If the shoe is too large for the foot, for the left foot in this case, the brain does not receive signals from the dead space. So there is no feedback from the shoe that covers the red area for the left foot. The right foot sends signals. So the right foot and the shoe are the exact size. So from the right foot, signals are fine to the brain. Therefore, if you're walking along and you hit your right foot on a curb, you probably, if you're strong enough to step with your left leg or strong enough, you've only tripped. But if your left foot hits the curb, you have no signals till you're fallen. Because the dead space in your shoe does not send signals. It's only your toes. So many polio patients would come to me with, they buy a shoe, unequal, same size, fill the dead space with bits and pieces of cotton and cloth, and they feel happy about it. That is very dangerous, because you will fall. You'll fall going up a step. Your left leg will just hit the edge of the step. You won't know till you're fallen. You go and walking on uneven ground, like soft, like turf, grass. The dead space doesn't tell you signals. It only when your foot goes over, and by then it's too late. And that's why many of you, when you step on a little conker or gum nut or a little bit of stone, you go over very quickly because you haven't received signals from your foot. So your shoe cannot send signals to your brain, only your foot. So you must either buy, in this case, this person must buy 2 pairs of shoes, but certainly the orthotists in Christchurch, they said they have the ability to buy in shoes of different size. It's only a matter of the orthotics department negotiating with the shoe supplier. So that's something for you all to know, and just go to those orthotists who are selling, these are just casual shoes, walking shoes. So you don't have to make those horrible, ugly surgical shoes that are heavy. You can have casual shoes, but unfortunately you have to go to an orthotist. Unless your local shoe shop will allow you to buy one of each, which is very unusual. Yeah? So please remember, so the first false trigger is, are you wearing shoes of the same size for an unequal size foot? Are you stuffing the dead space in your shoe with cloth? And even sandals, this goes for sandals also. Please don't mark my word, don't be bewildered the fact that I'm not wearing shoes, I'm only wearing sandals. Because if the sandal is too big, the same thing happens. Okay? You're not only are you lifting dead weight, you're lifting unnecessary weight on a foot that doesn't have the strength. So even a sandal must be exact size. Next is the muscle capacity. Now, we may not believe it, but all of us, from a child to a 90 and 100-year-old, have all of those muscles that the picture has. It may not be that size, but every muscle fiber is present. Even if your muscles were paralyzed, the vestige of those muscles are present. So muscle capacity is what I referred in my first talk: endurance, strength, and power. That is muscle capacity. So the next factor for balance is your muscle capacity. Endurance, again, is the ability of or capacity of the muscle to sustain a movement, to keep on keeping on. In polio, poor endurance, the complaint is, my foot sticks but my body keeps moving. I've heard this so many times. I do not know. I fell. You know why? Because my foot stuck and my body just kept going. That means what happened there was you had no endurance. You got so tired that the muscles on your leg just stopped working, stopped sending signals to the brain, and the brain could not send the next signal for you to lift your leg up. This is true. I just cannot move anymore. I'm stuck. So I'm walking in the shopping center. I'm stuck. I can't move. I have to stop for a while or lean against the wall, and then I can continue. So now you are in a very bad stage of poor endurance in your muscles. Just be careful. So that's one of the common complaints. When I'm tired, my joints give way suddenly. No reason, no warning. There was a reason, there was a warning. You're too tired to acknowledge it. Okay? And, or you did not know that that's the warning about. The warning was that you are going to fade out in a few seconds. So, but this happens when you are tired. And joints, remember I talked about proprioception. Joints have this little a neuron mechanism of sending signals to the brain to explain where in space you are. So this is example I said. If you're not looking at your hand, you know exactly whether your fingers are bent or straight, and even to the degree of bend, however small the bend is, you know how small a bend you have only because of this thing called proprioception. But proprioceptors also get tired when the muscles don't feed back. So when you got no endurance, you will complain of, when I'm tired, my joints give way suddenly. I went for a walk with my friends, was proud to keep up with them, but I was unable to move for the next day. That's another common complaint. And if you go to a physio with this, she should know it's endurance. And she doesn't need to ask you anymore. And that is why I need all of you to go to sort of 1 or 2 physios only, so that they can also acquire the skill. From what you say, they can translate it to muscle. Okay? So the other big complaint, in the early days of my polio clinic, the first 100 or so patients would always come with the same story. I went for an overseas tour. I had climbed the bus steps. I kept up with everybody, walked the Great Wall of China, but came back, and after 2 months, I washed out, could not move, and then they panicked. So what happened is you burnt out your muscle, you used it right to the max, now your muscle just cannot move anymore. You literally have pulled everything back. You have destroyed muscles and neurons. So in that case, it was strength and endurance. Now what is strength? Strength is the ability to generate force. Every muscle in your body has the ability to generate force, every muscle. Decreasing strength is seen as difficulty with daily activities that were much easier to do a few months ago or a few years ago. For example, unable to move my hands after pruning roses. You prune roses once a year. Okay? So that's an once a year activity. Of course your muscles will burn out. The muscles of the hand are very small. There are something like 10 to 15 muscles controlling it. When do you ever strengthen that muscle? And yet you're gripping small secateurs. Now if you had used the big pruners, you may not have felt it, or even if you electrified. But when you use secateurs, yes, repeat it on and on and on. The muscle stops, the hand stops functioning. So that is a strength issue, but it's also an endurance issue. Okay, so you're not strong enough and you don't have enough get up and go. Unable to get up a step. Going up a step does require force generation, and you're not strong enough. Difficulty going down a slope or down a step. So going up a step and going down a step requires different muscles to work differently. For you, it's the same task, but for us, it's a different muscle. So when you have difficulty in either of these, you have loss of strength. Unsafe over uneven ground. Because your toes can't grip your shoe strong enough, that is why you feel wobbly when you're walking on something like, if you're going onto a very slippery, a tile floor that looks slippery. Even when it looks slippery, you worry. Am I strong enough? Yeah? And you walk across it very carefully. Because your body is telling you you're not strong enough. That alarm, your body is telling you, but you're ignoring it. Or all you say is, I'm just very careful. So the fact that you've told me you feel unsafe on very polished floor tells me that you are losing strength in your feet. And that's what I need my colleagues to learn. Okay? And the same happens to grass, on turf, and gravel. All of that tell me about strength. Power is the ability to generate force in a given time. So power is a factor of strength and speed. So are you strong enough and are you fast enough? So the manifestations of this are, if any of you are slowing down in getting out of your chair, you are losing strength, you're losing power. Not endurance, it's strength and power. Difficulty climbing stairs, now same thing. I mean, it's also power because you've got to go fast enough onto the front foot. And often patients will not complain of slowing down. What they say is, my arms, shoulders are starting to ache. And they don't identify. Some will identify, it's only when I go upstairs. Or some identify it only when I ask them, have you got stairs? And does it happen only when you go upstairs? That means your legs have lost strength, and so it's going onto your shoulders. So that's why your shoulders are starting to hurt only when you go upstairs. You don't have, otherwise my shoulders are fine. I only hurt when I go upstairs. So that tells me it's an unusual activity for your arm, so that's why it hurts. But what it tells me is your leg is losing its strength. Because you could go upstairs before. And not enough push to go up a slope. You forget that even slopes, even a small curb or a slope, requires a bit of a power push, the calf muscle. So if all of you don't have, those who don't have calf muscles or toe muscles, you're going to have problems. Because truly, it's the big toe is the one that triggers the push. It's not just the calf muscle, it's the big toe muscle, the one that pulls downwards. If your big toe can pull down, those of you, if you've lost all the other toes, but you still have your big toe pushing down, you still have a bit of power to move forward. So this is what the physios have to assess you. That is why they need to assess you. They need to assess you from your toes right up to your shoulders, all the way up, through your spine. So balance is a factor of endurance, strength, and power. If you lack any of this, and you have any one of those complaints, you are at a high risk of falls. So I've done two: unequal foot size, strength, balance, and power. Next, the third factor that affects balance is joint stiffness and pain. Pain and stiffness in the joints of the neck, your thoracic spine, and your lumbar spine, and especially lower limbs. That's pretty obvious. But you forget your spine is also involved in balance. Will put you at a risk of a fall. What pain does, it slows down the muscle. It stops muscle contraction. The brain, if there's a pain signal going from any joint, any muscle, the brain's first tendency is co-contraction, that it makes the opposite muscle contract to try and ease off the muscle that's hurting. Now, when I have two sets of muscles here, flexor, biceps and triceps. When I move biceps, this stops working. That's mediated by your brain. You just can't stop it. The brain stops it. You can't do anything about it. But if in doing this is painful, the brain will at once stop this and make this work. So that's why you drop things. Okay? So when you have pain, that is why. So the brain is telling you, do something about it. So brain can slow down contraction. When an athlete has a pain, a swollen leg, you've seen all your rugby players, etc. Whenever they have any pain, somebody runs out on the field and puts ice on it. So that's what we're trying to slow pain signals to the brain by ice, because making the nerve cool down slows the signal transmission to the brain. Okay, so that's one. So pain, and why we do that? So that the brain doesn't clamp down on the muscle and stop it working. Often the athletes, they'll spray something cold on their legs so they don't feel the pain, and they send them back to play. Now, that is why athletes burn out, because their muscles just literally turn into fibrous tissue. They actually lose muscle because of that. So they're not listening to the pain signals, or we are ignoring them. So pain can slow down. Now, don't forget neck, even neck pain. How does neck pain make you a false risk? Because, remember what I said before, you have to get your head to come. It's the head that signals your reaction of getting your center of gravity over your base of support. It's actually the balance centers in your ear and the slight head moving. So if you have poor, even eyesight can cause the problem. If you can't look to the left, neither can you then make your head go to the left. And I'll tie in that later, how much the strength of the eye muscles is controls your balance. But for now, neck stiffness, I can't do this fast enough. If I can't do that fast enough, I can't get my rest of my body reacting fast enough. So now you're a stiff board, and that is harder to move. So the stiffer you are from anywhere here, if there's any pain in thoracic spine is this part, and the lumbar spine, it'll cause a risk of a fall because you can't rotate, you can't quickly put your hand out, and you're stiff. So pain has to be paid attention to. You must get medications to stop pain. This thing about I do not like medications. I never take medications. I move through pain. It is not safe. It's not safe. Neither am I telling you to pop pills. So take enough painkillers to reduce the pain, and go to physio and find out why did the pain happen. So look at the cause of the pain. And the other problem with chronic pain is it's very hard to treat chronic pain. So when you have pain for a long time, all we can tell you is we can't cure it. You just have to learn to control it, because you've let it go so long that the original cause of the pain has disappeared, but your cells in your body act as if there's still pain. They keep sending signals. So that's where chronic pain comes in. And that's a nightmare to treat. Okay? Now, so please do not ignore pain, because it puts you at a false risk. The next is coordination, for stiffness. What stiffness does is does not allow movement to flow smoothly. Now, you all know in golfing, a golfer needs strength and mobility from his big toe to his little finger. Because if anything happens along the way, his swing is altered. So you understand in golf? But how about when you hang clothes up? Same thing happens. From your big toe to your finger, you must have enough coordination so you neither bend backwards, right, nor do you stretch forward, right, so that you do not fall. Because if you're stiff anywhere, if you're stiff in your toes, you can't anchor your feet to allow you to lift your arm. If I'm equally balanced, all I have to do is actually blink. I can lose my balance. This happens in quadriplegia. You don't see it in us because our brain is signaling the muscles constantly. People who are paralyzed from the neck, why are they tied in? Because all they have to do is actually blink and they'll fall off the chair. So please understand, we are, from head to toe, every joint is a coordinated movement. So stiffness in any joint can cause a problem and trigger a fall. And the most common causes of stiffness are, look at the bottom, look at that side first, please. See the black line? The black line indicates a deviation from normal. The middle picture is someone with really a flat foot, but fairly uniform, fairly even. That first picture shows how, as from a flat foot, due to weak imbalance, the foot starts to turn inwards. So we call that a valgus deformity. If your foot starts to collapse inwards, that displacement causes a lot of what I call micro tearing. Now you don't see the micro tearing, but you'll report it as, see, my foot is starting to swell these days. In the morning you wake up, it's fine. By nighttime, it's swollen. If you're sitting in a wheelchair, it's a different reason. But if you're walking around, then you have this problem of micro tearing, causing swelling over time. So what swelling does is slows down circulation. And so you've got to get rid of, if you've got swelling anywhere in your toes, in your foot, and in your lower limb, you must get rid of it. So muscle and joint sprain and strain can lead to stiffness due to micro tearing and swelling. So that foot is a swollen foot just because he's collapsing medially. And so that person really needs to do something about it, otherwise he's not getting signals going from the foot to the head. Now, footwear is the other most common reason why you get that first picture. If the sole of your shoe is worn down on the inside, your foot will follow the shoe. So it's cheaper, really, to get a shoemaker, a bootmaker to re-sole the shoe rather than to end up having that picture. Now, the picture on this side, this extreme, if you have a flat foot and you're collapsing inwards, your feet are turning inwards, it goes up to your knee. Over time, your knee will end up knock-knee. That's the picture of knock-knee you get when your flat foot goes on to become ankle turning inwards. And not only that, you'll end up with hip pain complaints and spinal pain complaints, all because you didn't have a right insole in the early days. So this is where we link up with orthotists. We have to talk to orthotists to say, a physiotherapist looks at your muscles, looks at everything and says, look, all the muscles are actually functioning. It's the angle of pull that's changing. So we send you to an orthotist to say, look, all these muscles are working, but that angle of pull for the first picture is such that something has to be done. And it's as simply, if you go early enough to an orthotist, all he has to do is give you an insole. And that will correct all the way up later. If you are wearing your shoe down on the outside, you'll get that middle picture. Your knee joint opens out. So when you talk about arthritis, that's what you're doing. And it could be just that your foot is stiff in the wrong place. Okay? So that is another false risk. So we've gone through 3 factors: joint stiffness, strength, endurance, and power, and foot of unequal size. If you are now starting to tick more than one, you are a high risk of a fall. Okay? Reduced eyesight. We think of reduced eyesight only for reading. When we are young, we rely on vision, sensation from the feet and your joints, and signals from the balance centers of in the middle ear to maintain balance. As a young person, I can teach somebody young to do a surfboard. Why is it hard to teach an older person? Because all of these systems are not working 100%. As we get older, we rely entirely on vision for balance. And the common complaint is, I lose my balance when I go out in the night. I fall when I go out in the night. This complaint tells me this person is not orientating to space. Now, how does poor vision help? We all in this room orientate our head movements to eye. So if everybody's looking at the chart, keep looking at the chart and try and turn your head to that side. You can, but you've got to override it, okay? For example, look to the side you want to turn, your head goes with it automatically. That's why, okay? If you look, your head follows. But if you keep your head still, if you keep looking there and say turn to the right, I can still do it, but I've got to think to do that. Can you see that? So if you've got to think to maintain your balance, you're going to lose it, okay? So what I'm saying is, poor vision, our balance relies on us looking at a vertical. It's not conscious, it's an automatic thing. So I know I need to orientate myself to something in the vertical. Another example is like a dancer. The reason they can whirl round and round and stop dead still is because every time they do a full circle, they're coming back to a point in space. They've looked at a point in space, they turn and come back to that point. That's why they don't get dizzy. If ever you get dizzy in the car, look to the horizon at a spot in the horizon, not something close, something far. Okay? So that orientates the balance centers to midline. When you have poor vision, it's not the reading I'm worrying about. It is because you can't orientate yourself at night is why you tend to trip and fall. And it's often made worse by the fact that you're also doing an activity. So you go out at night to do something, put the cat out, bring something in, take something out. So poor vision affects our ability to balance. Hearing, don't ignore hearing. It's not just that I can't hear. We orientate to sound. We orientate our body by sound location. If somebody's calling me, I know where they're calling me in space. So accordingly, I turn. So my brain has already signaled my muscles to contract, to turn to that side. If I hear a vague sound somewhere and I'm trying to do this and I've got stiff neck or a painful shoulder or I'm not strong enough, then by the time you've turned, you've forgotten and you've lost. Because that call is so sudden, you want to turn. So this is other complaint. They say that when my patients tell me that they actually have to stop and look to see who's calling, then I know they are starting not only their hearing, but also the strength, the muscles, and so the balance is starting to be affected. There's something else they're called otoliths, little crystals in our middle ear. So these crystals are in the inner ear. And these crystals, the inner ear can be affected by infection. So if you have a ear infection, or if you have a sore throat, if you have flu and all of your throat is inflamed, it can go into your ear. So when you get stuffed ears from a flu, please understand your balance center will be affected. So you'll feel a bit more dizzy. So when you get up from bed, your whole moves around you, just because you had the flu. Now, the flu won't have an effect. Why it has an effect? It's affecting those balance centers in your ear because everything is swollen. Okay? So you need to do something about that. There are lots of, if you complain of dizziness, there are lots of reasons why you're dizzy. Only a medical person can sort that out. Go and see a doctor. there's something called BPPV. It's a particular diagnosis. Now, many physios know about this, and the most common complaint is, when you're in bed and you turn your head to turn over, and the whole world swings around you. Okay? That can be, may not be, but can be BPPV. We are trained to look for this, and we can treat it. The Hallpikes, that's all it takes, just one maneuver, and it's honestly almost like magic. It just stops the dizziness. Then we teach you how to do it at home if it happens again. So there are exercises to follow up. Now, whether it's dizziness or BPPV, you're not going to know it. A physio should be able to diagnose it, and she treats the BPPV, and if you have more dizziness, if she thinks you're infection, she sends you on to the GP. So go to your GP and have it looked at. Okay? But it can be treated, and that's why. It's benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. It's a big name. But it is so easy to treat. It truly is one of those miracles of treatment. So if you have decreased sensation from the eye, hearing, you're at risk of a fall. Do something about it, please. Skin sensation, gone through this before. All of you have poor temperature control, common to polio. Poor temperature control leads to slow. You have poor temperature control. We're not sure why, okay? Because if they did the blood flow studies, all the blood is flowing to your feet. So why you feel cold, we can only assume your muscles are not pumping. So those who feel the cold the most are those with muscle paralysis. But all polio seem to feel it. There is no answer, but for those with muscle paralysis, because your muscles are not pumping the fluid back or circulation back. So you don't have the flow of blood. Now the balance, again, remember as I said, we dampen signals by putting ice on it. So your foot is almost perpetually in ice. So the signals from your foot are slower going to the brain. So it's not so much that you're feeling stiff now, it's because the cold is making the signals to your brain slower. So you are at risk of falls. What do you do about it? That's from the time you wake up to the time you go back to bed, keep something on your feet. Keep nice woolen socks. It's the only way we know. There's no other treatment. They're looking into it, by the way, so when it'll come around, I don't know. Swollen feet, because oddly, it's only the polio population complains of that. The odd cancer patient may, but we think, well, cancer patients have received so much radiation. But head injuries don't. My Guillain-Barré doesn't. The tetraplegic patient may have more spasticity, so they don't complain of cold feet because they're moving all the time. I don't know. It has to be something particular to polio. Swollen feet, swelling around the ankle and foot reduces the body's ability to feel displacement, reducing proprioception feedback. Proprioception is in every joint in your leg and in your foot, and it tells the body where you are in space. The foot, there are something like 15, 20 little joints in your feet. And every joint has got a lot of proprioceptive feedback. And if you are swollen, it dampens. The nerve can't conduct, because swelling strangles the nerve. It strangles the circulation also. So swollen feet is a real problem. Please, before the swelling gets chronic, do something about it. It's not the feeling of stiffness that concerns us. It is the fact that your signals from the brain do not go to the brain fast enough. If it's stiffness, it's easy. I can give you an exercise. We'll sort it out. But if it's due to conduction problems, then we are faced with a huge issue of getting rid of your stiffness. So chronic swelling, chronic edema, chronic lymphedema is a hard thing to change. Please go to the physio and have it looked at sooner rather than later. And talk to your doctor. Find out why you have swelling. It could be fluid. Simply a matter of fluid imbalance. Could be sodium. I know. The doctors know here. They'll tell you. Fatigue. The other false risk is if ever you get physically or mentally fatigued, you are a false risk. Very common complaint. The point is we need to work out whether it's physical fatigue or mental fatigue. So which came first? Physical fatigue is secondary to lack of muscle endurance or strength for the activity, even if you have been doing the activity for a long time. The common complaint is every year we go hiking with my family, now it washes me out. And I ask the same question. You are aging. What have you done to keep strong enough for the hiking that you're doing? So if you are going to do activities that are not normal, part and parcel of your daily routine, train for that activity. Aging does affect the muscle's ability to maintain strength. Training is required for any activity that is not part of your daily routine. strength training, endurance training. Okay? So that is physical. Very simple to overcome physical fatigue if it's due to muscle problem. Physical fatigue can be due to a lot of other factors like chemicals in your body going out of balance. So undertaking activities that maintain muscle strength and endurance will reduce this aspect of physical fatigue. But there are other biochemical imbalances that contribute to muscle fatigue. Your GP will be able to pick that out from a blood test. The only known specific muscle protein marker is CPK, creatine phosphokinase. Whenever the patient complains of fatigue, our consultant will send them off for this. But all it tells us is you're burning up your protein, that you're doing too much with your muscle. And unfortunately, CPK is also used as an indicator for myocardial infarction. So that's how the doctor can tell you, oh, you've had a silent heart attack, because there's a marker. But that is not the only marker, only reason why you have fatigue. If your sodium is out, calcium is out, potassium is out, there are many, many chemical markers that need to be in balance. Popping pills, alternative. I've got my good friend Tess up in Perth. She loves giving additives. See, every patient takes additives as it's going out of fashion. I mean, there's a danger in it. Please talk to your GP. I'm not knocking it. If it makes you feel better, yes, but you're spending a lot of money, talk to the GP, because anything you take, if it's going to have a good effect on you, it must interact with something else. No chemical in your body acts in isolation. So discuss, please, with your GP. If your GP is not willing to discuss it, then go and talk to pharmacists. That's what they're trained to do. Mental fatigue affects the ability of the brain to direct signals to the muscles. So if you're not physically fatigued, you may be mentally fatigued, and that's why I always ask the patient, which comes first? Which came first? Did your muscles stop? Did you stop the activity and then you felt mentally tired, or were you mentally tired when you couldn't move? It does make a difference. Because if you're tired, remember what I said, the feelings from your legs must go to the brain must process it. But if you're already mentally tired, the brain can't process it fast enough, and so you're fallen. So one of the symptoms are what we call split attention. I have to stop and talk when I go walking with my friends. That's the first sign of you're unable to do split attention, and therefore your risk of falls. Why? Because you're getting mentally fatigued also. Okay? So this is only mental fatigue, not physical fatigue. When I'm walking, but I can't walk and talk. It can be secondary to physical loss of strength, because you are concentrating on so much on moving your legs, you actually can't pay attention to what the person is saying. So I'm not totally right in saying it's entirely mental. So if you're weak in your legs, you can't split attention because you're concentrating on walking. But if all things being equal, it has to do with mental fatigue. So be careful. Do something to stimulate your mind. I went through that in the earlier talk. If someone calls at me in a shopping center, I have to stop. Whereas before I could just turn, wave, and walk on. Now I have to stop. It can be strength, but more often it's also inability to split attention. Sleep is essential for muscles to recover from daily activities. If you do not have a long enough sleep, if your sleep is not restorative, if you wake up in the morning feeling tired, as you have said, ma'am, your sleep is not restorative. If you wake up in the morning feeling tired, your sleep is not restorative. We have to look at it. Now we call it sleep, give it a name, sleep apnea. And sleep apnea causes both physical and mental fatigue. So it causes both. Your mind doesn't switch off, neither do your muscles. So even though you think you're sleeping, your muscles are still working, jumping around a bit. So you get restless leg, you get cramps. All of this can come from just not good sleep. Now, there are many causes of sleep apnea, and often the patients, I ask the question, did you go to the toilet because you woke up, or you woke up to go to the toilet? It's a different, very important. If you woke up to go to the toilet, you got a bladder problem, see the doctor, see a continence nurse. If you went to the toilet just because you were awake, then it's probably a sleep problem. Okay? So sleep apnea itself has more than that reason, many reasons. Talk to the GP. Of concern is obstructive sleep apnea, where there's inadequate oxygen going to the brain, and that's when you feel you're falling in space and you wake up suddenly. You could have a snoring pattern, you go up and down, okay, and you actually stop breathing and your partner pushes you to wake you up. You wake up feeling tired, you get tired almost mid-morning, and you fall asleep on the wheel. All of these are signs of obstructive sleep apnea. It still can be more silent than that because you drive yourself to keep moving. And so unless you're working and walking around, you can't keep awake. You've got to move to keep awake. You can't even sit still for a while. So please have it tested. A lot of sleep clinics around, I'm sure. And if you do not know where, I'm sure Anne has a lot of following up to do. And what they do is they wire you up to a lot of leads, or they can also send you home with a lot of leads. They watch you sleeping, and they see how many times, there's a machine that records how often you stop breathing. It also records how much oxygen is going to your brain. If they tell you you need that CPAP machine, please use it, because it tells you something. I do not give exercise programs for anyone who's got obstructive sleep apnea, because I used to do it before. I used to say, look, do these exercises while you're waiting for the sleep clinic appointment, and invariably the patients got worse. So now I just blanket rule. Say, come back to me when they have addressed this, and then I'll give you the exercise program. Until then, just do what you're doing, because what you're doing is wearing you out anyway. So get that sleep sorted out. Get the sleep sorted out. You must come back to me, because these are the muscles you have. I've done a muscle chart. I've done the full program. Please, it is a very serious problem. Okay? And if you already have the trifecta for heart attack and stroke are high blood pressure, diabetes, and hyperlipidemia. That's your trifecta for heart attack and stroke. So is sleep apnea. Okay, especially obstructive sleep apnea. It's been known to have high risk for heart attacks and stroke. So please be careful, pay attention to it. It's so simple to get it sorted out. There are lots of masks these days, so go back and talk to the supplier. Just say, look, the mask is ineffective, or it's blowing too much of air, etc., and have it sorted out. If you go on a holiday, take the CPAP machine with you, especially on a holiday, because you're going to need that, because you're doing more than your normal activity. End of the day, it requires your GP, so please go and see your GP. And I always tell my physios, please write there, see GP, follow up first. Polio patients complain of increasing muscle fatigue after exercise when they have non-restorative sleep also. Okay? So remember, if you can't sleep because you've done too much, that's also different. Okay? I did a lot of exercise. Christmas is a good time. You're baking, you're standing, and then you can't sleep. Your legs are jumping at night. Yeah? You got cramps at night, your legs are jumping. Because, you've never done that much cooking during the year. So think about it. Okay? Sometimes when you have cramps at night, there are ways of looking at it. Cramps can also stop your sleep. And it's a matter of simply stretching the muscles. That seems to have worked. There's a Swedish study that says stretching just before you go to bed does reduce cramp. Sometimes it could be simply as because your knee is paining, because your knee is hyperextending. Those of you in calipers, you're in calipers because the back of the knee has gone backwards. And so when you're not wearing your caliper and you're lying in bed, your knee is so far backwards that the joint is locked. Your kneecap is locked down and you have pain. So it's very simply just putting a pillow under your knee. But please don't take this as a recipe. You have to go to a physio to get a full assessment done. Medications are the other high false risk. You must be responsible for the side effects of all the medications you are taking. Please don't say the doctor wrote this to me and gave it to me. I do not know what it does. You must know. Because there's medications to reduce stress and promote relaxation. Okay? If you're stressed and you go to a doctor, he gives you a relaxant, it works by relaxing the muscle. You already have a muscle that's too relaxed. Can you see why you're risk for? Now, if you need the medication, take it. Take it at night when you're sleeping. So just, so this is by negotiating with a GP at what time of the day you take it. So Valium is one of the biggest culprits for that. Some medications to reduce high blood pressure, they work by relaxing the muscle. That is why your muscles are too tight, the muscles are relaxed, the blood pressure comes down. Equally, you must take your medication. So when in the day you take these medications may be the answer. So just changing the time of the day, you need those medications, please remember this. Now, if you have things like Valium, a muscle relaxant, either for blood pressure or for stress, then you've got to do a bit more to increase the resting tone in your muscle so that muscles have enough tone to not relax so much. So that can be done. And in fact, the right type of exercise, as I said, will also reduce the demand for medications. So for both reasons, you need to go. But if the point, don't lose track of this presentation. If you're on these medications, you're at a high risk of fall. Talk to your doctor and have it looked at as to whether you can turn it around. Statins, now it's not an argument anymore. Even everywhere, even Google has it now. 5 to 10 years ago, I think the GPs refused to look at it. Now they acknowledge it. Statins do cause muscle fatigue. You need the statins to control your cholesterol. Please look at it. If you have just a low level of, if your cholesterol is just above normal, maybe look at exercise program. But normal activities can also feel tired, okay? Because if you're not strong enough, you don't have endurance, just doing daily things can make you tired. Is it my medications? Is it my activity? Don't just stop taking medications, talk to your GP. Talk to your physio, okay? Between the GP and the physios, they should be able to work out something. Being physically fit does reduce your need for high-dose medications. Discuss with your physiotherapist how to manage a fitness program that's appropriate for you. So, false risk medications. Comorbidities, these are things that you get. Polio does not prevent or protect you from suffering other medical problems that the general population faces. For example, early signs of some of the neurological conditions also present a slow, stiff, shuffling gait. Both cerebral palsy patients and polio patients say, I'm starting to shuffle these days. I'm not striding out. It could be weakness. Honestly, it could simply be weakness. It could be that your shoe is not right size, right fit. It could be as simple as that. But also it could be early signs of Parkinson's. You don't know. I will know when I assess you. If I'm a bit suspicious as a physio, then I will say, can you go to your GP, and I'll write the GP a personal note. I don't, most of my information I give to the patient. But when I write to the GP, I do say, look, I'm a bit concerned. The signs may seem to indicate the muscle strength is fine because I've done the muscle chart. I've included the muscle chart. Is there something else happening in the system? Okay, so I write to the GP and ask that. An inability to maintain balance when turning. A lot of you have that. So you're walking along, but you can't turn suddenly. You have to stop to turn. And when you turn, suddenly you fall into the turn. Okay, could be something as simple as your shoe is worn off on the outside. Okay, and told you I'll pick on you. When you are standing, you're wearing a caliper, sir. Barry's wearing a caliper, but he's standing on the left foot. I'm not sure whether you realize this. You're standing on the outside of your foot, and your toes are coming up off the floor on the left side. Okay, that could simply be the shoe wearing off. But what that does is you're walking along, especially if you walk on a camber. That's it. That's all that's required. And slopes can be very just a small slope. But if you're walking on the wrong camber, you'll fall. And many of you walk on slopes, you know that. Now, if the camber is wrong, you fall. So you have to have your stronger leg on the down, the weaker, your polio leg on the top to be safe. If you walk on the other way, you go with the flow, you fall. So it could be that, but it also is a sign of some neurological diseases. So you've got to be investigated. So this is why I did talk to all the physios when I said, this is not a clinic for young graduates. It's a clinic for someone who's out 10, 15 years, who has seen enough patients to know what I should be concerned about and what is just really muscle. Difficulty moving from carpet to tiles. It could be weakness because you know instinctively I'm going to slide. Could be that. But it could also be some of the cerebellar or the frontal. Even if you've fallen often enough, you end up shuffling. You keep hitting your head often enough. You have concussion. You don't know it. You will not know it. But it will show it may. What I'm trying to say is there are many, many other reasons. Okay? But weakness and loss of strength and loss of endurance is also, all these are a picture of loss of strength, loss of endurance, and bad shoes. So which is it? Have an assessment. Rheumatological complications, joint disease can present as muscle and joint stiffness. Generalized muscle and joint pain and fatigue. Same thing, yeah? What you complain about, people with rheumatoid arthritis and other rheumatoid conditions will complain. The polymyalgia rheumatica is very high. A lot of our patients have that. And polymyalgia just means every joint in my body is hurting. And all I do is, in this case, and you're chasing the pain. One day it's here, one day it's there, one day. Now, it can sound as if the patient is just complaining about stress. But it could, so we send the patient GP, take a blood test, or send to a rheumatologist. Polymyalgia can be treated. It turns it around at once. So once you have no pain, no stiffness, you're fine. So polymyalgia is a big problem. Fibromyalgia is another one. Lots of aches and pains everywhere. Everywhere you touch the person, it complains. So I won't ignore it. I'll just send the patient back to the GP and say, could it be this? Could you please see what can be done? Anti-inflammatories, whatever treatment is recommended. Please put this patient on this and then send the patient back to me, and then I will institute an exercise program. Even in fibromyalgia, exercise does help, but it's how. In fact, in fibromyalgia, we reduce it from less than 50. It almost goes to 20 to 30%, right down the scale, and then very slowly to bring it back up again. Early signs of cardiovascular disease. Now, that can manifest as loss of endurance and breathlessness. So I walk 100 meters and I'm breathless. I stop, I recover, I can walk again. Endurance or myocardial disease, cardiovascular disease. You won't know that, I won't know it. I send the patient to the doctor first. Pain or cramps. I walk so far and my leg cramps and I have to stop. I wait for the cramp to die down and I walk again. That can be strength loss, endurance loss. It also can be deep-seated varicose veins. It could be aneurysm, aortic aneurysms, any of them. All of these are medical conditions that need to be looked at. So before I send, if the patient complains of, how do I say this to you? By the way you complain to me, I will know whether it's muscle or not. Put another way, okay? Because I've seen so many. I've heard 500 stories. If the physio is uncertain, I'll always tell the physio, send this patient back to the GP with this complaint, with the muscle chart, with this ability, with the basic test, two-minute walk test, whatever test you have, and then discuss it with the GP. So it requires a thorough medical assessment. So if you have comorbidities, you're also false risk. So now we have come to 10. Now this is a huge one. Incorrect prescription of mobility aids. A mobility aid is an object external to your body. It enlarges your base of support. That is all an aid is. It enlarges your base of support. It also enhances your balance and allows you time and speed to get your balance back over your base. Okay? That's what an aid is. So a walking stick, for example, the base of support, a person with a walking stick can offload the base, offload his weight. So he's sharing his weight with the stick. Now, whereas your base of support is your feet, now the stick adds the bigger triangle. Okay? So always think your frame, whatever it is, it enhances your base of support. Okay? You've just got a bigger base. It gives you a stick, slows you down. Sometimes we give patients a stick just to slow them down, so that you have enough time to react to displacement whilst I'm working on your strength and power. We'll always withdraw it. You yourself will give it up once you know you feel safer. But initially, there's nothing wrong in using a stick, just to give you enough time. And obviously, it moves you from one point to the other in a safe manner. A mobility aid is not a substitute for balance. So if you are using your aid for a balance, how do you know it? You're causing joint stress. Ask yourself, do you need something more supportive? If you're using a walking stick and the walking stick gives you pins and needles here, this is just not, oh, I got carpal tunnel. It's your stick is causing the carpal tunnel. If you have wrist joint pain, if you have elbow joint or shoulder pain, you are using your stick for balance now. You need to move on from a stick to either having two sticks or a frame, okay? Because you're already starting to cause problems. You need a review. You won't know it because you're doing it daily. You need somebody outside, stuck outside to look at you. So please see your physiotherapist to get an assessment. Shoes, orthotics, and calipers. Shoes are a big risk false problem. When buying your shoes, you need to consider a few factors. These factors are results of change over time to muscles and joints. And the example I give is, you're not wearing the same shirt now that you could wear 5 years ago. If it's the same size, it may be a size 12, but the shape has changed from a very curved in to a straight line. So our foot changes also. So assuming that the same, because I love this shoe, I've used it all along, it's fine for me. It's not always. If you don't have enough strength in your muscles of your feet, the shoe may not be good for you. So please think about it, have an assessment done. A shoe that is supportive should be firm. It should support around the heel and ankles, but lightweight. Okay? Most of you acknowledge that. It needs to be lightweight. Now, I've put the first picture up. A shoe needs to give you that sort of support. on either side of your ankle joint. It must be supportive for the front. Sandals are fine as long as they've got a heel cup, and those straps, sandal straps, must be in the right place. Be it male or female shoes, the straps must be in the right place, and always please use a heel cup, even in sandals. It supports your shoe better, supports your foot. The sole of the shoe must not be rigid, because lack of flexibility in the sole of the shoe will make it difficult for some to grip the shoe with the toes. Many of you with weakness in your toes, if you can't grip the shoe, you feel you're falling. So, and often the orthotist and the patients are fighting on this point alone. The orthotist says, no, you have to have supportive shoes to put the brace in, and the patient says, I need a soft shoe, otherwise I'll fall. The problem comes because orthotist doesn't realize what muscles you are using. So those of you who have, even if you have a foot, now you've got to understand the muscles of your foot. You've got muscles that are called long flexors that come from almost from behind the knee, and you have muscles in the foot itself, right? And you could have lost any one of those, and there are like something like 15 to 20 muscles. And sometimes those of you with only muscles of the foot, then your foot is almost curving inwards, like a banana shape, every time you grip the floor. You are particularly the person who must have a soft sole shoe. A soft sole shoe and calipers and braces don't go hand in hand. If you have total paralysis, a rigid shoe is better for you. So your foot shoes is dependent on the type of muscles you have available in your foot. Caliper, they can only put on rigid sole, but sometimes they can put calipers into runners, the thick rubber soles. Trouble is, the thicker the shoe, the heavier the shoe. Now you can't lift the shoe. So that is the other problem you have to. So a muscle chart will tell you. A muscle chart will tell you. I don't have to see you. You send me your muscle chart. I'll tell whether this patient is able to lift. Now pay attention to the last of the shoe. That's what the shoemakers call it, the last. That is everything from the top. Does it fit you on the top? Does it fit you close enough on the side? Too much of space on the side of the shoe. Don't stuff things in to make the shoe tighter, because that will cause a fall. Sometimes the curve of the shoe, they call them, have you heard this term, cross trainers? Yeah. Now, runners are curved with the sole of the shoe curved inwards. Okay. If the shoe is going inwards and your foot is straight, all right, you can see where you're going to get rubbing on here. So where your calluses are on your leg will tell us whether the shoe and your foot are going in tandem. If you have paralyzed the muscles of your small muscles of your foot, and you're getting calluses on the top, that's because your toes are clawing in the shoe. You will see, I have to grip my shoe inside I've got to grip my shoe inside, okay? And that will cause rubbing on top, okay? Now, you have to address that. And special type of insoles will help you, but they've got to be careful. If you have collapsed, if you have callus on the underside of the foot and you're getting painful bunions and stuff, please have it looked at. A right type of insole is all you need. So now the physio and the orthotist must talk to each other. So again, the foot and the shoe is very important. Insoles, insoles are really support to the arches. You have two arches in your feet. One is a transverse arch and longitudinal arch. Flat foot is when the longitudinal arches collapse. You get calluses under when your transverse arch has collapsed. Okay? So that's when you have a callus somewhere in that region. All you have to do is an insole to support it. Now, if the arch support is too high and too rigid, like some orthotists love to make it quite hard, then your foot is going to go over. And now you're compounding the problem. So now that is where a muscle chart is important before you go and see an orthotist, so that orthotist knows what muscles you actually have working and how you use your muscles. And how the orthotist makes an insole is very simply that. They step on something soft, they get an impression, they take a plaster cast and they'll mold an insole. An insole must foot, I can't indicate it, must foot from the back of the shoe to the front. It should fit you all the way. But because it's made in a static medium, you're standing still, you're sitting still when you make this, but you're using it in a dynamic medium. So you cannot you can't make something 100% perfect in a static medium when you're using it for a dynamic purpose. So you'll never get it right, always send it back. Don't keep a $100 equipment sitting on a high shelf, please. Send it back and get the orthotist to correct it. Because he will. You just need to know. And the other big thing is, yes, I've got pain in my foot, but you can't see it now. I can't show you now. So that's a wrong thing to do. Mark. Get a permanent marker. Mark the points where you have pain and then go and see an orthotist. And when you come to see a physio, also mark. You may not have the pain all the time, so mark the areas where you have pain, and I can tell you whether it's your shoe, because you change your shoe, but you may not realize it. And bad fitting shoe can also cause infection in toenails, so don't forget that. That's another big problem. So shoes are important because if your shoe fits you well, your balance starts in your base. Okay? So you've got a good base. You're not a false risk. Support around the heel and ankle is essential if there's weakness in the foot, as I said. So sometimes even a brace can help. Proper brace. Feet are markedly different in size, so you must have the appropriate length of shoe. We have already covered that. Now, some of you may have tight calf muscles, and those, if you know you have tight calf muscles, if you're sitting and you keep pulling, if you pull your foot, as you're sitting now, if you pull your foot back, and as you pull your foot back, your heel starts to come off the floor, okay? You have tight calves. Either there are two muscles in the foot that cause this problem. The gastroc muscle, that's that lovely curve muscle that you see in weightlifters, and there's another muscle called soleus. Either one can be tight. And that tightness will cause you, when you're walking, your heel doesn't touch the floor. One foot heel can touch the floor, the other foot, the toe touches the floor first. Now, if the assessment needs to be done, in this case, if you only have tight calf muscles, I only need the heel raise. But if you have a short leg, you need a full shoe raise. Okay? The whole shoe must be raised, and sometimes you have a combination. All of this is assessment. You're not going to know it. I will. By looking at you, by the way you stand, by actually measuring you out. We will know whether you need a heel raise or a shoe raise. Now, the problem with, and I've raised this many times with the orthotist, somewhere between the orthotist and the shoemaker, there may be miscommunication, and I have seen many patients who have walked for years on a shoe that was raised too high. Now the polio leg is longer than the good leg because of that miscommunication. And this patient comes to us not noticing any of that, saying, I've got hip pain, I've got back pain. And all I need to do is send him back to shoemaker, reduce it, get rid of this. So I do send them back to their orthotist now to make the point. So it can be as simple as that. So if you're wearing shoes that are not raised to fit your leg, you will fall. Open shoes and sandals truly are only good for those with some muscles in their feet. If you have no muscles in your feet, you're risking a fall because you cannot lift the weight of the shoe. The simplest orthotic for a foot drop is what somebody said, who was it? Someone had the Dictor splint. Yeah? It's the simplest foot drop splint. But sometimes you can actually wear, in this climate where it's quite cold, wearing a boot. Boots with rigid, lace-up boots are better because zip boots are fairly loose. A lace-up boot acts like a splint. It does exactly like a Dictor splint, but you need to learn to walk in it. So once you learn to walk in it, a boot will do the same job. A Dictor splint just pulls it out. You can also use a Dictor splint like the lady has. For those of you who say, I'm fine, I can lift my foot up, but after a distance, my foot starts to drop. So you have muscles in your feet. What's happening is it's tiring out. So I would encourage the Dictor splint, because what the Dictor splint does is you can work against it and actually strengthen your foot. So it's a good splint. It's a sensible splint. It's a simple splint. So if you don't want to wear boots, go for a Dictor splint. But things like an orthosis do present a problem. We'll discuss it now. You need training to use a custom-made orthotics. If you've got a knee brace, not an issue. If you're having a brace that goes from your knee to your ankle, we need to retrain you as to how to walk in it safely. And sometimes just using a stick for a few days, that's all you need. So whenever you take possession of an orthotic from an orthotist, you're walking in their ground that's flat. They've got parallel bars. They see, they adjust, very fine. You walk out and you fall. And I've had this problem, $800 equipment sitting on a shelf because the patient couldn't use it. So please see your physio first and then the orthotist, and then go back and see a physio and say, watch me walk on grass, whatever. So make time. It'll take only half an hour or so. So gait training is only a few minutes. Now orthotics, off-the-shelf orthotics rather. An off-the-shelf orthotics does not work on a non-uniform leg. And all of you who have muscle paralysis in your legs from polio have a non-uniform leg. But anything off the shelf is made on the assumption that you have the same contour. Now you have an equipment that's either too big or too tight in the wrong place, or it's not supporting. What this can do is cause rubbing and pressure on the wrong muscles. And I've seen patients with wasting using the orthotic like those pictures that you see, and it pressed on the peroneal nerve, it pressed on the nerve that comes on the side of the foot and actually started to cause a foot drop. This lady was alert enough to realize it and stopped using the splint, and the muscle nerve came back. But it can be quite devastating. So be careful. Off the shelf doesn't work for you all. You need custom made. Padding an orthotic is equivalent to making the patient fit the orthotic. So make sure the orthosis fits you, that you are not made to fit the orthotic, okay? Because it'll cause a high risk of a fall if that happens. Calipers have come a long way. They must be made to measure. The pictures on the right are old calipers. They have very fancy, lightweight calipers. But equally, they're very lightweight. They're very well made. We have something called the electronic knee, $10,000. It stops you collapsing your knee. It's too heavy. So what we do, we use it for those patients who already have a caliper on one leg, but the good leg is starting to give way. Right? I have nowhere to go now. So what I do is I try the electronic knee on this patient, call the orthotist, he talks to the patient, and then they go through artificial joints that do the same on a very lightweight plastic. Okay? So then now you have a lightweight splint that actually can stop midway and stop you falling. It'll hold, it'll lock itself. So there are lots of new changes in orthotics. They use a lot of new materials. So you please be open-minded about this. The worst thing to do is tell the orthotist, please copy this caliper. It's a wonderful caliper. I feel so comfortable in it. That is 20 years ago. And you still want that same caliper. It's just not going to work. If a caliper doesn't fit you, go back to the orthotist, please. Yeah? Because just a slight angle, it can push you into knee hyperextension. It can push your knee so far backwards, you shift your center of gravity. That's what's happening there. Your center of gravity is so far back, your foot is rising off the floor. Any of you, when you're sitting to stand and your toes are coming off the floor, you'll fall backwards. Okay? When you get up to standing, all your toes must be on the floor. So must your shoe. So if you're standing and you're flipping backwards, your toes are coming off the floor. You're high risk of fall. End of the day, calipers, shoes, orthotics, whatever, you're a high risk of fall if you don't get it checked. So get it checked. Now what do we physios do? We do a muscle chart. We look at, that's a muscle chart. We write it down. We got a way of writing it down from 0 to 5. 0 is no muscle. 5 is normal muscle. 3 is 50%. You only have 50% of normal muscle. Anything less than 2 and 1, you've had it so long, I'm not going to change it. But if you have 3, I can change it up to a 4 if you had a stronger. I will know whether you had a stronger muscle. Our testing will show it. Okay? So that's how we do it. We test every muscle, we record it. We test every joint, and we record it. We put the joint and muscle together, and we can tell you why you're having the problems. Yep, and I see you. You are a false risk if your balance reactions are not automatic. Remember what this is. Don't lose track of it. You are a false risk if your balance are not automatic. If you have to think about walking, you're a false risk. For whatever reason, if you've got to think about walking, please have it checked out. If you cannot be distracted when you're walking, you are a false risk. It only takes one fall to fracture, and you go from able to disabled in 24 hours. Please be careful. Consider factors we have discussed above. Solution is very simple. Minimize the risk. Environmental risk. Remove and relocate obstacles, rugs, furniture in the wrong place will cause a fall, including for those of you with calipers and sticks. Catching your stick on the edge of a chair will make you go flying. Grab rails in wet areas if you have difficulty clearing steps. So even if you don't use a rail in your shower, put one in, because that one day you slip, it's there for you. The other big common place where patients fall is when they're stepping out of the front door, because you're doing two activities. You're opening the door and stepping out at the same time. So put a grab rail there. You're absolutely safe then. That's how you fell, huh? And then opening the door at the same time. Use aids, trolley. Use a trolley. Instead of carrying things, use a trolley. The OTs will be happy to supply it. a walking stick is for you only if you need touch balance. So if I can touch and maintain my balance, only then you use a walking stick. But if you need to actually hold a surface, you need elbow crutches. Okay? You need more than a walking stick. If your arms are starting to hurt with elbow crutches, you need to go on to, I would always suggest a rollator frame like the one in front here, because a frame distributes your weight and you've got a chair to sit on at any time. So between an elbow crutch and a rollator frame, actually I like that better. But if you're younger, then go for the the crutches, but you must be strong enough in the shoulders. Not strong enough here, strong enough up there, that way, that way. You've got about 6 to 8 muscles you must strengthen if you want to be strong enough in your shoulder so that you don't end up with surgery on your shoulder. And what is wrong with a manual wheelchair? Use the manual wheelchair for outside the house, because a manual wheelchair allows you to burn off calories, so keeps your weight down, also strengthens your arm if the chair is well made. So that also needs an assessment. If the axle is too far back, you will actually strain your shoulder. So the axle of the chair must be in the right place. So there's a science to wheelchair prescription. A lot of OTs are involved in this. Go and ask them. But don't discount it. Use a scooter. It allows you independence in the community. It does present its problems for transport, but you can always look at it. Maintain your fitness. That's the best solution for false risk. Minimize the environment. Look at what you're doing. Maintain fitness. As simple as that. And you're not a false risk. Regular exercise 2 or 3 times a week. Aim to increase your endurance, strength, and power. And any exercise program to maintain you must have repetition, resistance, and speed. Housework and lifestyle activities, example bowling, swimming, yoga, tai chi, shopping, are activities that maintain fitness. I told you this before, go twice a week shopping. If you're looking after your home, think about how you do your housework. And do gardening. Gardening is a good activity too. Have an assessment done by your physiotherapist, discuss with your GP what is right for you. So please minimize false risk, and if I can, move well and stay on your feet. Now, having said that, this book that is in your bag, this is great. This actually summarizes what I've just said. If you turn to page 7. In page 7, it says how you can help yourself. Keep up your general fitness by walking 30 minutes. There's a caution for all polio patients. If you have paralysis, if you're on caliper, I really will not recommend you use walking as a means of fitness. Okay? You have to find another way. You have to find a gravity-illuminated medium to maintain fitness. Pool is an excellent place. And then there's another page on page, for example, page 15. 1 in 5 people over 65 will suffer serious injuries as a result of a fall. So maybe you can get a status on amongst your population. Put it as how many of you trip every day, how many of you fall, then you'll get a population study that it is higher than that. Average population is 1 in 5. I think in the polio it's much more than that. So you are a false risk. The government has spent a lot of money doing this for the same reason. It's a very expensive exercise. Please, it is very simple to prevent a fall. Thank you very much.